And I want to start by kind of just telling you a little bit about my background. I was born in Durango, Colorado. My parents were actually living in Farmington, New Mexico, but my mother decided at the last minute she did not want to use that hospital. She preferred to go to Durango, which in 1953 was a very long ride over a dirt road. And I was born in a Catholic hospital there. And then we lived in other places in New Mexico and Colorado, but I spent a lot of my growing up in Boulder. And my parents were, and our whole neighborhood were very lower middle class. It was, post World War II, the women did not work. And this was a very point of pride that women didn't work. So the men worked, but most of them didn't earn enough. But we all had to kind of pretend we were fine. My father lost a number of jobs. And so my sister and I, very early on, I remember when I was about 7, starting to mow lawns. I cut a lawn. Somebody cut a lawnmower off for me, so it was small. I could mow lawns, and we would shovel walks, and we did all kinds of things for money, and we never thought anything about it because everybody in our neighborhood worked for money, and we contributed to the household. But I remember thinking as a child, when I grow up, I'm not going to live like this. My mother always cut coupons. Some of you may remember green stamps and endless green stamps. I am never in God's green earth going to buy anything on sale, and I am never going to use a damn coupon when I grow up. And I just had all these kind of ideas of what it would be like to have money, that you didn't have to do stuff like that. And over the course of, later in my life, as I got to know my grandmother was from Appalachian, Ohio, and I realized sometime later, and probably in my teens, somebody actually said to me, "Your grandmother is white trash." And I realized that was true, that our family was out of what is now called that. And it's a very interesting concept, white trash, because the notion of, it's very racist, I think, not so much to white people, but the notion is that it is such a disgrace for white people to be poor, that we are trash when we are poor, whereas people of color, that's just the norm for them. And it's like a really deep thing to kind of wrap your mind around. And so when I was about, early on, so they kind of coming to grips with that. Sometime when I was about 9 or 10, I thought, I got to get out of Boulder. Boulder was at that time, some of you may have been there, it's now this very upscale yuppie town, but when I grew up there, it was this little narrow-minded cow town, horrible, awful place, I thought. And also, everything was so gendered. We had to, there was a dress code for school, and you had to wear these old dresses. And my aunt always bought these super nice, I suppose they were nice, they were disgusting to me, frilly dresses. And I would be like, I can't ride a horse in this dress. And my mother would point out that I did not have a horse. So anyway, it was very, very funny. Of course, we were religious. I wasn't allowed to use lipstick, and by the time I was allowed to use lipstick, I never wanted to use it. It's too late. So anyway, but I thought, I got to get out of Dodge. So my grandmother gave me this book by Langston Hughes called My First Book of Africa, and it was this opening to this. I don't think my grandmother really had much idea who Langston Hughes was, but it was this opening to the idea that you could go someplace. So I decided I'm going to Africa. And I started to pick cherries and sell cherries at a cherry tree. Sell cherries, I'm going to go to Africa. And I heard somebody say, a little Klein girl thinks she's going to Africa. She'll be lucky if she ever gets to Denver. Her dad, But I was like, I'm going to Africa. And so everybody thought it was very cute. So then when I was about 12, my dad came home, and he worked for by then the state of Colorado, the revenue department. And he came home and he said, the University of Chicago is recruiting a bunch of men to go to Nairobi, which happens to be in Africa, to go to Nairobi and set up an income tax system there, and I'm going to apply. And I was like, oh my God, we're going to Africa. Right? And of course, my mother didn't want to go at all, but she agreed because she thought, never on God's green earth would we go to Africa. That would be ridiculous. Why would they pick my dad when they have the whole world to choose from? So they choose him, and off we go to Nairobi. Which was really... It was one of the 3 greatest things that ever happened in my life, and it was hard. It was really hard. That's the first time I ever saw real material poverty. I mean, if I had ever thought I was poor, that idea went out of my head. I totally experienced racism and was really a part of it as a colonialism and racism. and it took many, many years to process that. But it did really change my life and make me think I wanted to go into social justice, because you could see that that's what that was about. So anyway, kind of coming forward after we left Africa and came back, I went to college. I came out here to California to study to be a Methodist minister. So I was also grew up in a very religious family, and I remain to this day very religious. And sometimes people say, you mean spiritual? I hope I am spiritual, but no, I mean religious. I don't, because I think people aren't comfortable with that notion of being religious. It is possibly be religious and not be right-wing. I just want to kind of say that. So I studied to be a minister, and in the course of that, you have to do these field placements. And field placements are generally done in a church, but some of you know I was allowed to do my field placement at a secular organization, and I did it at La Casa de las Madres, which is the domestic violence program for the county of San Francisco. And when I went to La Casa in 1976, they had just opened the first actual shelter for survivors of domestic violence. We were the first shelter to open in the state of California, and we were the fifth shelter to open in the United States. So this is very early on, what was then called the battered women's movement. And so no one was talking about domestic violence. No one was funding it. So I was supposed to be a chaplain, but I never won chaplain thing, because when I came into the organization, they said, you have to help raise money from churches and synagogues. So I was like, well, I don't know anything about that. Well, you can recognize a church from the outside, so that's a big plus. And this is really why I went into fundraising, because all you have to know is one unimportant fact more than everyone else. You can be the chair of the committee. So anyway, so I was like, okay. So I started doing that. I started writing proposals. But one day when we were at La Casa, so some of you, how many of you ever worked in a shelter, homeless shelter? Okay, so people give stuff to shelters, right? Stuff, and a lot of it's just crap. I mean, it's just unbelievable. You should be embarrassed, right? But in those days, we felt like we had to accept everything. We had to be all grateful. Oh, thank you, Mrs. Jones, for your couch has been sitting outside for 5 years. But so, for whatever reason, people gave couches. We had so many couches and sofas. It was unbelievable. So my office where I worked, my office was all couches. So I sat cross-legged on the floor with a typewriter on the couch. So anyway, I'm in my office, and suddenly the window of our home was blown out, and this guy's standing out there with a gun, and he goes, "Send out my wife. I will keep shooting. I know she's in there." So the woman, so I grabbed all the kids, like 11 kids there, grabbed them all the way, all get down behind the couches, for which I was at that moment totally. Okay, kids, you sit down. So she goes outside on the porch like this, and she said, he's about this far away, and she says to him, "Put that gun away and get out of here, or we will have to call the police," which I knew we were not going to do because it was a policeman's wife staying with us. So that was never going to happen. And we were actually afraid someone would call the police, and this would be a problem. So she had to get him out of there. "Put that away. Your behavior," she says, "is entirely unacceptable." And he was so shocked. I think he didn't really expect that particular response. He got in his car and drove away, because these people are basically fundamentally bullies, and they're kind of cowards. And so the next day we had an appointment, and I see my time is finished with this, because this is how I got into fundraising and why I think women have to know everything they possibly can about money. The next day we had an appointment with a person who could give us $10,000, which even today is a lot of money, but in those days was unimaginable. Okay? And I said to her, "Why don't you come with me to this appointment, and you can describe what you did yesterday, because that was pretty amazing." And she said, "Oh no," she goes, "that would be too scary." I'm like, seriously? You would face down a psychopath with a shotgun? We're not. So anyway, I went into fundraising because the friendly people live there. And so this brings me to my point that I started with. My life is surrounded by generosity in fundraising, in nonprofit work, and social justice work. All you deal with day in and day out from morning till night are generous people who want to do the right thing, who want to make a big difference. And the thing I learned at La Casa, which actually sent me into fundraising, is that if we don't know everything we possibly can about money, if we don't hold it lightly as a tool, it's simply a tool. It has no moral value. You can use it well, you can use it wisely, you can earn it doing good, you can earn it doing badly. But if we don't learn everything we know about it, okay, then we collaborate with the very system that we claim our work is trying to change. Because one reason why people stay in abusive relationships, whether actual relationships or jobs or whatever, is because they don't see any economic alternative. And our job is to give them one. And I congratulate Kate for all the work she's done over all these years, and all the rest of you on your efforts to help us move out of that and move into an entirely different frame. Thank you so much.